The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 16. Londinium. It took me a moment to realize that I had left the mists and entered Londinium. The streets were so choked with fog that I could scarcely see more than an arm's length before my face, and I thought at first that the blurred outlines of buildings around me were the sorts of vague images that one's mind conjures to break the monotony of the mists. Not until I heard a child crying for help did I know that I had arrived. I am certain that my patron will mock my powers of perception here. Doubtless his eyes would have pierced the fog and seen the truth of his surroundings the very moment he set foot in Londinium. Alas, he is forced to rely upon my meager talents as I struggle in vain to think and formulate solutions to everyday problems. I had intended to spare my patron an exhaustive report detailing every strategy that I employed in Santa Cecilia, summarizing only my magical efforts to show him that his gifts were being well used. Otherwise, he might accuse me of neglecting to use them, as he did in Flint's Archipelago. It seems that my patron desires a more thorough accounting of my actions. You will find a more detailed report attached to this one, Yensid, and I do hope that you find it enlightening. I ran toward the child's voice. Every turn I took on the streets is detailed in the attached notes. But when I arrived, she was gone. All that remained were the prints of a man with a peg leg. A man I would soon learn was a lieutenant of the dreaded Lord of Londinium's underworld. While a queen ostensibly rules Londinium, its true ruler is one who styles himself as the world's greatest criminal mind, Professor Radigan. The Lord. Radigan's precise origins are a mystery. I was unable to determine whether professor signifies an actual history in academia, or simply an affectation he has taken on to proclaim his intelligence. I have attached all of my research from Londinium's public record office, lest my patron accuse me of overlooking something. What is known is that Professor Padraig Radigan has his fingers in virtually all criminal activity in Londinium, and there is much activity for him to oversee. From gangs of thugs who murder and rob for him, to corrupt officials who abet his smuggling and embezzling operations, Radigan's empire cuts across all social strata. Matters have only grown worse since the death of Radigan's greatest rival, a detective known as Basil of Baker Street. Basil was always able to foil Radigan's plans before they came to fruition. With him gone, there was no check on the criminal underworld save a hapless and overwhelmed police force, many of whom were on the professor's payroll. An emboldened Radigan has proceeded to concoct ever more elaborate and far-reaching schemes, as if mocking the police for their inability to stop him. Rumors persist that many of Radigan's enforcers are monstrous in some way. Lycanthropes and undead are said to serve in his ranks, and he supposedly has a trained wyvern who devours incompetent minions. Apparently, the quickest way to draw Radigan's ire is to assert that he himself is a lycanthrope, specifically a were-rat. After Basil foiled his attempts to kidnap the queen and claim the crown for himself some years ago, multiple eyewitnesses saw him transform into a massive, slavering sewer rat. Even though his monstrous nature is now a matter of common knowledge, Radigan sees to it that anyone who publicly remarks on it is silenced. Multiple journalists in Londinium have been blackmailed, beaten, or found dead in the sewers, as if to make a point as to who the true sewer rat is. The land. Although Londinium contains many lavish country estates, windswept moors, and lonely chalk cliffs, the heart of the domain is its eponymous fog-choked city. A center of commerce, academics, and culture to rival Levkarest or Illaluk, Londinium has a seedier side lurking just below its surface. The obvious divide is between the prim prosperity of the uptown and the wretched squalor of the slums. I saw a gentlewoman feeding fresh meat to her lapdog in the park, while, a mere block away, children scavenged for discarded potato parings in an alley. Even beyond that divide, however, was a general sense of duplicity. Most of the people I met greeted me with cheerful smiles or impeccable manners, but something about them made me instinctively eye their hands in case a knife appeared in them. Perhaps this is merely paranoia. Give me time, and I believe I could find a piece of gossip putting every citizen of Londinium on Radigan's payroll. In fact, I found many specific rumors surrounding individual citizens and have attached them for my patron's edification. I found the talk about the true ownership of the rat trap particularly engrossing. Much of the gossip, of course, swirls around whatever happens to be the most recent crime spree in Londinium. In this case, it was a series of kidnappings. From a match girl who had not appeared at her usual street corner to a young duke who had been snatched beneath his governess's very nose, highborn and lowborn children alike were vanishing, and the police could find no pattern to the disappearances. Any faith I might have had in Londinium's law enforcement vanished at that point, for with the time I spent in the Public Records Office, some of the names were familiar to me. All of the kidnapped children were related to a former client of Radigan's deceased rival, Basil. In fact, the connection was so obvious, as were the distinctive peg-legged tracks leading away from the kidnapping sites, that only two possibilities presented themselves. Either Radigan's criminal genius had been dramatically overstated, or he wanted to be caught. Dread possibilities. My first impulse was to tell the authorities what I had deduced of Radigan's scheme. However, given the rumors of widespread corruption throughout Londinium, I suspected that such a report would make it to Radigan's ears well before it reached anyone who would take useful action. On its face, rescuing these frightened, stolen children from an unknown fate had nothing to do with researching the domain. However, it meant a chance at coming face to face with Radigan, and my patron was so dreadfully disappointed with me for not securing an interview with De La Cruz in my last report. The peg-legged tracks were so obvious that they were clearly a trap. I do hope my patron will not scold me for using invisibility to conceal myself as I followed them, in order that Radigan might be less likely to detect my approach. Perhaps this was an everyday problem for which my poor mind could not formulate a solution. Nonetheless, I instead chose to make use of the tools that my patron specifically gave me for carrying out tasks such as these. I was able to slip past his henchmen easily. At the time, I thought that this was either a testament to their inefficacy or further proof that I was walking into a trap, but I now know the true reason. I eventually followed the tracks to a river dock, where I found the children in a bizarre death trap. Each hung in a cage over the water, which was red and slimy with chum, shark fins occasionally cresting the surface. The cages were held in place by a system of pulleys, and it was clear that their captor intended to drop them in one at a time. The captor in question, a hirsute man whose massive body strained the seams of his elegant suit, was eyeing a gold pocket watch while more of his lackeys manned the pulley systems. "Basil will be here at any minute," sneered the man who could only have been Professor Radigan. "I flushed him out by capturing a single brat in that Faversham incident. Imagine how he'll come running for a dozen of them." His henchmen had not missed me because they were unobservant. They had missed me because they were watching specifically for the deceased Basil of Baker Street. Perhaps Basil was a ghost, or perhaps Radigan had some intelligence suggesting he was alive. Regardless, I could not stand by while he lowered those cages one by one, waiting for his rival to appear. I had seen portraits of Basil, enough that my silent image was a passable imitation in the foggy darkness. When Radigan saw the image, he froze, and his expression was not one of belligerence or anger. It was pure, joyous triumph. Shouting for his minions to follow him, he dashed toward the shape. A silent image is not a powerful illusion spell, particularly against a mind as potent as Radigan's was said to be, yet he continued his fruitless search for Basil long enough for me to free all of the children and escort them to safety. If Radigan was duped for so long, it could only be that he wanted to believe my illusion was true. Parting thoughts. I conducted further research into Basil's death, all of which I have attached, but while his body was never found, there is no evidence that he is still present in Londinium, alive or undead. It could be that Radigan is so mired in paranoia that he cannot believe his hated foe is dead, but the expression I saw on his face was not one of hatred. Perhaps the two were friends or lovers before they found themselves on opposite sides of the law? The sight of those captured, frightened children gnawed at me. Between losing the memories of my family in Sunnyside, my strange encounter with the Abridged in Santa Cecilia, and now these children, I found myself desperately missing my family. I needed a resupply anyway. Perhaps I could do so in Salem. I held my mist talisman, a small pumpkin, and entered the mists with home in mind, but my thoughts were scattered. My niece's face was replaced with that of one of the handmaids from the Queenswood, my brother's with the frozen gaze of Princess Anna. When the mists parted, I was not standing in Salem. I was in a wealthy house, one that had been ransacked by bandits. Furniture was overturned, and a Yule tree was stripped of all its decorations and gifts. The bandits had broken the windows, leaving the house at the mercy of the elements, and I stood ankle-deep in rainwater. I had not arrived home. With my distraction, I made my family disappear. Regards, D.
Should my little servant continue to act indignant and foolish every time she receives constructive criticism, she may condemn herself to wander aimlessly through these misty realms forever, never to return to the family she longs to see. Anger distracts the mind, and traversing the mist requires diligent focus, lest one be led astray. My scholar's scrupulous report provided a wealth of information that entertained me for quite some time, despite the unnecessary, exhaustive descriptions. Though you are not privy to my interest in these realms, I expect you to exert logic when approaching your research into the domains and their dread lords. Something, much like Ratigan, my servant often lacks when overcome with emotion. Whereas Ratigan is misguided by his wrath, my servant often succumbs to nostalgia. Do not mistake my observations of your character for insult. It discredits us both. Utilize all of the tools at your disposal and let reason guide you. As for Ratigan, he has built a criminal empire and controls every aspect of Londinium from his throne of refuse. Most crime lords would be satisfied with such an achievement. Ratigan, the self-proclaimed greatest criminal mind, craves more than power. He desires undeniable proof that his mind triumphs over all others. However, with no worthy adversary to challenge him, the game, as the professor has been known to call it, grows stale.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at DarklordAslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening.